The average candidate resume was in the database 10 or 11 times. Lots of duplication. So once we identified that, we figured out that this company was spending about $400,000 or $500,000 on resumes more than one time. And we saved them $500,000 a year.
So I think don't overlook that, hire for the job they could do and not necessarily the job they've done before. So yeah,
I would differ that. I would say always be pushing out content, always be creating content.
Right? If you can, yeah.
All right, please welcome to the show, Nicola Kleinmann. Nicola, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Jeff. Really nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Fantastic. So give me a quick introduction, what it is you do, who you work for, and all that fun stuff.
Sure. So I have a business called Your People Associates, and we help clients, generally scaling clients. So we work a lot in the tech space with companies that are looking to rapidly scale. And we help them with everything from maybe setting up an HR function from scratch, right through to helping them build out like the talent attraction, the EVP. So we're looking at that whole employee life cycle.
You guys are developing the employer value proposition, the employer brand, and everything like that?
Yeah, so we do all of that with the clients, and we also can roll out, the creative side of that. We can also look at the actual hiring strategy. So we do a lot of training for kind of line managers and look at, like the whole process. So we tend to look at things quite holistically because these businesses, they're scaling SMEs. So, they tend to have quite a broad role themselves. So we will step in and look at the entire process with them.
So when you're rolling out, let's say a brand new startup company, they've just gotten funding, they're not a unicorn or anything, but let's say they got 10, $20 million in funding. Where do you even start with an employer brand? I mean, you have to have an EVP, right? That's kind of your mission statement and all that stuff, right? But once you get past that, I mean, I've heard some companies spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on redeveloping their employer brand and things like that. Is that where they need to start? I mean, what's the budget? Let's kind of walk through that whole thing.
Typically, I think some of these companies, and I'm obviously not talking about all of them, but I was having a chat actually with a client the other day, and I was like, you need to talk about your employer brand. Employer brand, what's that? So sometimes we really are starting at a base level, even though they could, like you say, have heavy funding
right over their heads, right?
Really quickly. Yeah, and they're all maybe about the consumer brand, but don't understand that actually they need to be working obviously on employer brand as well. So we don't have the kind of budgets to play with that obviously a big corporate would have. And these companies, they need to be very agile. And a lot of the money obviously goes really on, how do we actually hire the people? They don't always want to take that step back and look at the bigger picture. So sometimes it's a lot about education in terms of why would we do these things? Why would we take that step back? Why?
If you think about it though, I mean, their main issue is they need headcount. They need to bring on people. They've gotten all this money, and I guarantee you a large portion of that budget is going to be towards salaries. And if you can't hire the people, then you're not going to bring it on. Employer branding is great. I'm all for it. I love it. Obviously, I'm in the space, but it's very, very top of funnel, right? And pushing candidates into the top of the funnel, making brand awareness a top priority is probably not the best strategy or solution for a brand new startup that just got funding. Especially if they don't have recruiting processes in place. Because you can push a whole bunch of stuff into the funnel, but if you don't have the mechanisms in place, recruiters and a recruiting process, an ATS, a CRM, to work all those things through the system, then nothing's going to come out the end anyway.
Yeah, so I think we would always go in and scope out where they're at in this journey. And when you're dealing with startups and scale-ups, the interesting part is actually they're not all at ground zero. Or, they might have scaled, but things might be falling over now. So a big part of what our job is actually, as you said, we're consultants. We go in, we do discovery days, we do workshops, we look at where they're at, and then we would scope out some sort of strategy and plan with them. And that's the exciting part for me, because it can be literally, as you say, implementing everything from scratch, or we're looking at things and we're re-engineering. So it could be that actually the process is broken. It could be that there is no awareness. It could be that actually the attrition in the business isn't great, so actually onboarding needs fixing. So there are lots of different things that we look at, and it's, you know, the employer brand is a part of it, but also the other elements for us is this like holistic employee life cycle is really important. And for me, your employer brand touches all of that anyway. You know, I think when you try and like sort of, you know, compartmentalize that, it doesn't work so well. You know, when I'm coming into your business, I want to feel actually that's connected. So what I see in awareness through like hiring process to onboarding to being part of your company and your culture, it should all flow and it should be the same. You know, I should as an employee feel actually that that's real, it's authentic, and I should feel that through all of those processes. So I think we tend to look at that more holistically. And
should these startups really be piggybacking upon the corporate brand that is already developed as much as possible?
I think they have to work in tandem, don't they? It's really important that you know, there is a connection between. But if I don't know, like take a company like Facebook, for example, you know, everything that happens in Facebook, that is their employer brand. It's like living it daily, isn't it? If something goes wrong on Facebook, it has an automatic effect straight away. But at the same time, that's not to say that you wouldn't build out those assets, those key milestones in terms of what someone would expect as an employee. And I think it's become even more important now to try and separate the two, because, you know, I don't drink Coca-Cola, but would I want to go and have a job there? Yes, I might well do, you know, because I could have a great career path there, but it doesn't really matter necessarily what I think of the consumer brand. So it's really important, I think, to separate the two. You know, I want to see what my career journey is going to be like, not necessarily what products I might have. You know, I think to think that people are going to join just because they like your product, that's, you know, it's a bit old-fashioned view now.
There's differing thoughts on that, right? So, you know, I think an older generation, you know, I'm 53, we really don't care. Gen Xers don't care. I think maybe a Gen Zer may care a little bit more than me. So if I have about a 10% threshold on the amount of careness I'm going to put towards it, they're probably going to have a 40 or 50%. They're not going to work for a brand they're not really interested because of the product or service or solution that they offer. You know, we see it here probably a lot more in the United States than ever in Europe, because in the United States, we're kind of in a little of our micro bubble. And in Europe, you have access to so many different other cultures and things like that, where we just don't have that. You know, in the United States, we got Mexico and Canada. That's it. So we tend to regionalize a little bit more. You know, it's like, you know, Florida's, you know, got their own culture, you know, New York and New Jersey, and then you got Texas and California, and then pretty much everything in between.
Yeah, and I think you're right about that. I mean, I was on a call earlier with a client, and again, you've probably got 10 nationalities around the table, you know, and fortunately for us, right, the common language is always English, but, you know, you've got your French people and you've got your Indian people, you know, there's a real mix. And I think the diversity actually in Europe is great, and obviously growing all the time. So yeah, I think there are those nuances as well in terms of like what those different cultural elements might be. But yeah, for me and the sort of scale ups that we work with, I think it's almost striking that balance between, as you say, the awareness, the creativity, but then going at scale and at pace, because they can't afford to have these jobs that open. So you have to kind of have the practical working in tandem almost. And I think it's like trying to jump in and get that machine going, you know, start to get the process going, and then you're almost playing catch up behind yourself with like really fixing the EVP and the kind of creative behind you, that timeline to do it all in necessarily the right order.
So going into the creative piece, right? So building content is very, very time intensive, right? You need, copywriters, or at least somebody that knows how to write. You need, graphic designers and video editors and web developers to put it up on the internet, or possibly even a social media manager person. Where do you start with all this stuff? Obviously, a lot of startup companies can start outsourcing it, with a done for you solution or a done with you solution. But if they have the budget to bring on some employer branding or recruitment marketing headcount, besides the recruiters and candidate sourcers, which are going to drive candidate traffic and interview candidates and things like that, what's kind of the next step?
I think it would be like someone, like you say, with that strong employer brand background that kind of knows how to orchestrate all those things. So, and then start to look, okay, what do we need in-house? What should we have in-house? What can we afford to outsource? And even have that network of people that they know they can go to. Because, if you're outsourcing to probably a full-on agency, then that can obviously get pretty expensive quite quickly. And I think it's knowing, again, like somebody that is that advocate across the different departments in the business. So able to work with marketing, able to work with talent attraction, able to work with the leadership team. So almost like a linchpin between those functions in the business to make sure that, the employer brand gets a voice, for a start. I think it's even that education piece, that go back to the guy I was chatting to you about, he's a COO. What's the employer brand? Like you sometimes have to be that advocate in the business as well to educate and to, because really the hiring managers, like, you'll know this, you just want someone in doing that job, that haven't necessarily got time to think about the creativity of everything. So I think, it's having that person that can coordinate and then start to understand, okay, maybe it's a graphic designer that could come in next, or it's a writer. But, often all of those sorts of things are outsourced, as you know.
Right. So what I have found interesting, I've been doing this a long time, 25 years now. And what I found is that there's a couple of key positions that are very, very difficult to bring in-house. And it's because the candidate market is definitely shrunk over the last few years. Obviously, web developers, right? So any kind of web development front end, especially UX designers, if you're doing landing pages and funnels and things like that, having that web designer in place that doesn't know all the back end, he doesn't need to do all the database stuff. He's doing front end graphic design. He needs to really understand the brand assets, if you will. And, driving traffic is not his thing. He's about making the pages look pretty, etc. That's kind of the key position that I would think that's probably the most difficult to hire. The next most difficult to visit or position to hire is what, in your opinion?
I think sometimes it's finding that actually that employer brand person that has that background of, like the understanding of the talent attraction, the HR piece, as well as maybe that creative thinker. Because I feel like a lot of employer brand people come purely from recruitment and then they don't have those other elements in play. So I think if you wanted to hire a graphic designer, that wouldn't be very difficult here. But maybe a graphic designer that has that nuance in terms of understanding employer brand. But I think for me, a really good designer can take a good brief and understand that. And then probably the video side of things can be difficult to hire here. Again, getting really good video skills, and that can be difficult. So I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of developers. In those other talent areas, there are people out there, there's good people out there. I think, again, it's like utilizing your network, isn't it, to find those good people?
Yeah, I think, as far as our agency is concerned, the most difficult is the web designer, making sure that they are, they know CSS and JavaScript and HTML and all the other fun things. But the next most difficult to position to hire for is the video editor. Having a video editor, because it encompasses so much graphic design and copywriting, and also they have to have most likely After Effects and also the video editing capabilities in some kind of Adobe, right? So Premiere. Having that person in place, the video editor, especially if they're doing a ton of video, most companies have no idea. You can run through a terabyte of data in a matter of a week or two or a month. You know, we run through about a terabyte a month. It's absolutely amazing how much video. One video can be, you know, a quick little, this video right here for today's call will probably be close to a 400 or 500 gigabytes. You know, it's a lot of data, and just transferring that back and forth up the servers, you know, keeping it on a shared drive, breaking a larger video, like a 1 hour video, up into snippets so you can promote the videos. It takes and now you've got multiple copies and different versions. It's just a lot of data that most people are not ready for, right?
I think there's such good outsourcing companies. I mean, you know, we use a great company for all of that. I think, you know, for us to take that in-house, that would be a big step. And ultimately, I think it is like looking at your budget and saying, where sensibly do you outsource? Very specialist skill. To do it well requires a team. So maybe not, you know, outsource that and use your budget elsewhere, you know, in terms of hiring on the team. And also some of those things, they ebb and flow, right? So you're not necessarily doing content all the time. So I think, you know, you bring it in when you need the skill and the service.
I would differ that. I would say always be pushing out content, right? So always be creating content.
Right? If you can, yeah.
Yeah. So I from a recruitment marketing standpoint, if you are not providing your recruiters with a steady stream of brand new content that they can push out, it can't always be text-based job descriptions. You have to give them other content. It doesn't always have to be the well-manicured brand awareness video that you're going to get from Nike or Reebok or, you know, some of these major brands, right? But you need to provide other types of content that you're constantly driving out there. And employer brand videos, you know, you got the big brand awareness thing, and it's probably going to be, you know, 2-3 minutes long, and it's probably going to take you 3 months to create. But then you also have those other micro videos, I call them, 30 seconds to a minute long, where you're getting a lot of employee interviews and, you know, day in the life of what it's like to work there, you know, what was behind your decision to come work here, what's the best day you ever had here, how are you being supported, all those kind of why questions, answer the why would I want to come work here. You have to get those answered in video. It's going to just power your brand.
I agree. And I think it just comes across as well as that authenticity. But I think like we would try and encourage clients to put together kind of calendars of content. So, you know, they're kind of breaking different elements down. And
now you're taking a whole other leap, right? Once you get up to a certain threshold, right? I mean, if you're just pumping out 1 or 2 videos a month, you don't need a content calendar. But once you start building out, you know, your content distribution and content creation strategy, a content calendar, once you give 30 seconds, what a content calendar is.
So for me, it's like looking actually across, you know, like a quarter, maybe a view to say, okay, what type? And for me, I'm always about repurposing. Like if I write a blog, how can I repurpose that blog? Could it be 10 Twitter posts? Could it be a Vox Pop? Could it be a little video? You know, like, so you're not necessarily creating content from scratch all the time.
Right.
So you're sort of repurposing an iteration of a idea or a piece of content. And then, of course, it's like trying to get the other people in the business as well. Maybe it's a hiring manager talking to video about the role that they're hiring, or it's a piece around what are you doing on mental health? You know, so maybe you go in and talk to the HR team and you get them to talk or write something about, you know, what's happening in mental health this month, or, you know, what's our view about remote working. So I think that there's lots of different things at the moment that people want to hear about. So I think if you're joining a company at the moment, they're for me the questions that are being asked over and over in terms of, you know, where we're going with this working world. Like, what is the attitude towards those things? You know, can I work remotely? Do I have to come into the office? Do I feel safe? You know, what are you doing about my mental health? Like, everything's evolving so rapidly at the moment, isn't it? And I think that having the answers to those questions up front will hopefully encourage the applications rather than people wondering about that. So I think, you know, the more you can get actually more people in your business talking about those things and how your culture is evolving, then that, for me, they're really important sort of like content drivers.
The idea behind the content calendar, everybody, is to really give a roadmap or a plan, a calendar of what content you're going to be producing. And where we start off is we say, look, what are candidates most interested in? What questions do candidates want to know the answer to about joining our company, about why they should come work here? That is first. And you should have a little bit of that in every single month, right? So if you're doing a 12-month calendar, every single month you set aside time to capture those types of stories, identify those types of questions, and really produce that kind of content and distribute that content. So there's the content capture stage, the ideas and what we're going to be doing. That's not the content calendar. The content calendar is, you have to actually plan it all out. So there's the planning stage. So do your planning and capture all of your ideas for a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day plan, and then go out and start capturing content. A lot of people, what they do is they say, oh, let's do this. We've got, a major holiday. We've got New Year's coming out. Why don't we just do an end of the year thing? Well, I started planning my end of the year stuff in September and October.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think
doing that 2 weeks before the end of the year is not, content calendar.
No, I think for me, there's like the sort of long-term view, and then I would break it down quarterly. For me, that's how I work, because I think a quarter out is,
and you can have themes for the month or themes for the quarter, right?
Yeah.
So this month is like, you find a holiday on the calendar. This month is, mental awareness month. Boom.
Yeah.
Boom.
And you might
find some of the top people in mental health, and you go across all sectors of society. Obviously you've got a prince over there, which is really involved in it, right? Prince and princess. Or did they abdicate their prince and I don't know how that worked. Prince Harry is really, yeah, he's involved in, heavily involved in the military mental health. So you could incorporate some stories from there, from different angles, but you have to plan it out, right?
Yeah, 100%. And you'll have, like, across the calendar year, you'll have the, the milestones that everyone will have, like Pride maybe, or you might have, we're doing around the holidays. But then for me, it's like drilling down in the quarterly basis of like, what's more sort of personal to your business? Because I think those things now everyone does. So it's almost like an expectation to have those things, but then what actually is more personal to your company, your business, and that can evolve. I think, if you did it 12 months out, it would be too long a view, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you can get a rough sketch of, hey, this is kind of the themes for the months. You don't need to actually have the week by week calendar planned out, more than 3 months, but at least have an idea of where you want to go. And it's most likely going to change. I mean, I change my stuff all the time. People, get COVID and they have to cancel their recording sessions. all kinds of wacky stuff happens, right? You and I were planning on having this conversation a month ago. And well, guess what? That same week, 3 other my guests got COVID. So
we all got COVID.
Yeah. So the entire month of November was, had it planned out. I had a theme, and boom, it was changed on a dime. And now this is all going to take place.
Now it's a COVID theme.
Yeah. Now it's a COVID theme, but luckily everybody is healthy and stuff. So that's good.
Yeah. Finally.
All right. So we discussed the team. We discussed, kind of a content calendar, a map, if you will, of what we, should be including in there. Resources. So if you do plan on bringing this, even if you plan on outsourcing, there's some specific either software or hardware or cameras and lighting? What kind of stuff should, which should they at least be thinking about?
Yeah, I guess if you've got it in house, and you're kind of at that stage where you are doing a lot of things in house. I mean, we would try and encourage like the videoing and stuff to be done wherever possible. I think with someone that is an expert, but you can like you mentioned, you can get some really good iPhone setups to do like your little vox pops if you want to go down that road. I think it's all depending on the skills of the person, the confidence, and especially when you're videoing people in the business, I think it puts them at ease if there's a professional behind the camera. But if you're good at that and you have those skills, then why not? You can get lights off Amazon, you can do different things. But for me, you've got assets like we had a debate this morning actually in terms of how you say this, but there's Paperfly or Papierfly, however you want to pronounce that. But you've got those kind of platforms where you can have your assets sitting. You've got obviously your Google Drives where a lot of these companies will be putting things. So I think it's about getting the setup correct so that it all runs as smoothly as possible, because it's a busy job, right? And you're managing a lot of different stakeholders in the business if you're an employer brand person, and you're trying to strike that balance. So I think the more organized you can be and the right sort of tools behind you is a good way to go.
Yeah, I always kind of use the old saying, lights, camera, action, right? So you have to have good lighting. You have to have a good camera. And with the camera, that's not only video, but it's audio, right? People have to remember video is not just video, it's audio also. So I always have lavalier microphones. This is a big microphone, but I also wear a lavalier microphone. It's just a skinny little microphone like this, right? $35 on Amazon, right? So always have, I have dual microphones because I do this professionally, right? But having a nice little, microphone, $35, plugs into your cell phone, use your iPhone. And then this thing right here is, where is it? This thing right here is a tripod. Just get a quick little, there you go. There's another one. I got tripods all over. Like this thing is like 25, 30, $50, and it's got a little light on there, right? Your phone goes right in here and you're done. So for less than $100, you've literally got a studio that you can go around and start recording videos. That's the biggest thing. You have to capture the content, but if you're going to capture content, capture good video, have good lighting, and have good audio. Then once you have it, you have to get it off your phone, get it off your computer, and get it somewhere where other people can have access to it. So you need a drive, OneDrive or Google Drive or some kind of storage place to put it all. And you're going to need a lot of it if you're doing a lot of video. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of our clients would probably stay away from that in-house. And, that would definitely be, I think, the one thing I do see outsourced the most is the video. Because, I think there's good and bad, isn't there? Like if you're good at editing video and putting that out there, as much as we want to see authentic content, it's also got to have an air of professionalism and look good, otherwise it's not going to engage anyone. If it's too amateur, I think then people switch off quite quickly. So yeah.
It depends. It depends on what the purpose is, right? So we do lots of videos on Zoom, right? Mm-hmm. So this is going to be produced on Zoom, and a lot of our hiring manager interviews where candidates want to know more about the position. Those types of videos we do on Zoom. We also cut in some stuff from just iPhones from around the office, stuff like that. Casual office shots, fine. Casual interviews where you're talking about the position kind of one-on-one, fine. If you're doing more of an employer brand video, outsource that. Get a professional videographer team in there. It's going to cost you an arm and a leg, but the outcome will be so much better because they've got the equipment. Understand that one of these professional cameras can go $10,000 to $20,000, with the audio setup, and one of these microphones can go $2,000 to $3,000 alone, right? And that's the level of quality that you need to get, and that's probably for the number of times that you're going to use it internally and have somebody professionally that knows how to use it, it's probably best just to outsource it. You're talking about $20,000-$30,000 just to set up a professional on-site video team and then keep them busy with work all day, every day. Outsource that stuff.
Yeah, 100%. But like you said, I think you can snap photos, if you're having a social, if we have ever a social again, but yeah, if you're having a social or you just want, pictures of people in the office, that kind of thing, then
outsource it.
Yeah, you can take some pictures. That's fun. Yeah.
Get 100, 200 pictures in there, pick the best 5 or 10. Not everybody's, it has to be a professional photographer to do this stuff. That's the whole benefit of using iPhones, right? All right, so you got the video down, you got the audio down, you got some casual, you got some really professional stuff. Distribution. How are you distributing all this content, right? Are you just having somebody internally just bang away at the keyboard and make all kinds of social media posts and things like that? Or how are you doing all the distribution?
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on the client setup, whether they're outsourcing to, like the likes of us or other agencies. I think it's sometimes the person in-house will be doing that. So it's then looking at your channel strategy and breaking down what are you posting where and when. So it comes back to your content calendar, your posting tools. We use different tools to help us to, curate that content. So there's I'm not even going to say their names. I think there's lots of them out there on the market. We know.
1,000 social media posting companies.
Yeah, right? So you get all that set up, so that makes it really easy for you. You also, I think the bit that we're really glossing over a little bit is what messages you're sending to who. I think you need to start drilling down some of this content. So you might have that overall awareness piece, but at the same time, if you're going out there to hire developers or designers or marketing people, you're going to have slightly different nuanced content and messaging to those people. So I think, again, if you're looking more sophisticatedly at some of this stuff, then you're going to need to be saying the right things to the right people.
Say the right things to the right people at the right time.
Exactly.
So a lot of brands are just taking a shotgun approach, right? They are just posting anything and everything on their social media channels. They post it on LinkedIn, they post it on Facebook, and it's kind of the same thing as using a job board for a post, search, and pray methodology. Post a job on a job board, search the job board, and pray somebody can find you. They do that same kind of strategy on a social channel like LinkedIn or even their Facebook. They don't know any differently though, right? So how else can it be done?
So, I mean, I think like all of those things as well, though, they all have a place, right? So if you came to me and said, should I ever put a job on a job board? Well, yes, of course you should, because it's a channel, but don't just put a job on a job board, but don't ignore a job board just because we're all a bit, like down on job boards. But it's about having the right strategy. And I think I would say to a client, if you're going to do nothing at all, or you're going to do something broad, then go for the broad option. At least you're getting something out there. But we all know that in order to really cut through all the noise, we're going to have to get a little bit more tailored and start talking, as we said, to the right people. So I think it is about education. I start with clients to say, okay, what are your growth plans? What are we looking at? We look at workforce planning. We look at the roles that they're going to need to hire in, what the timeline of that looks like, which roles are really hard to fill, where they need specialist skills. We even look at can people be retrained? So for us, it's not necessarily always about literally going out to hire. Sometimes it's about repurposing the talent that we might already have as well. So I think that's where the kind of HR piece comes in as well. So I think, I would say, if you're getting it out there in the first place, that's great, but then start thinking about being a bit more strategic about it. And that would be, for me, the place to start. So you don't say, well, we've got 22 different hiring functions in this business. Well, let's definitely have a stream for all of those. You need to start somewhere, and starting at what's most difficult to fill, or the bulk of the role that you might be looking at next year, then we would start to drill it down that way. And then hopefully over time, you're going to build up those sort of TVPs, as we would call them, like talent value propositions for each of those groups of talent, in the right order.
One of the main questions that I get asked in forums and stuff is, okay, we've got our employer brand piece and that's going out to our social media channels, but, where should we start with our direct to candidate messaging? Do we do it on LinkedIn? Do we reach out on Facebook, or should we be doing email campaigns or text message campaigns? And I always tell them, I don't know, because I don't know where your candidate audience is. And I don't know the behaviors of that candidate audience. That's where you should be looking to get advice from, is from your candidate audience. A, what kind of content are they looking for? B, how do they want to receive that content? And that could be as simple as sending out a quick little survey to 100 or 200 people in each one of your segments and getting some feedback. Out of those 100, you probably only get 10 responses, but that's okay. You have something to go on. And it might be an email, right? People that have previously applied to you. If that's where your candidate pool is, email is, probably the channel, or it might be text messaging. For example, you wouldn't go for, if we were trying to hire, 700 truck drivers over the next, 3 months, in the United States, I'm not going to go on LinkedIn to find a whole bunch of truck drivers, because that's not where the audience is. I might find some there, but that's not the main purpose, right? There are other jobs, or other locations where they hang out, which would probably be better channels to, not only locate them, identify them, but also engage them. So engage them on the channels where your audience is, and figure out the messaging capabilities of those platforms. It might be LinkedIn, it might be some other job board, it might be some niche bulletin board going way back. It might be text messaging, and you have to figure it out based on your channel.
100% agree with that. And I think, it's about the channel, but also, like you say, the type of messaging. Is it, an email, like you say? Is it an SMS? Is it a visual message? But one thing I do really see, and it just is like my bugbear, is that
it's your what?
It's my bugbear. I don't know.
Your bugbear? Your pet peeve?
Yeah.
No, I haven't heard of bugbear, but okay.
It's obviously a British saying. But yeah, they don't keep in touch with their talent pool. It's like,
imagine that.
I just see
they applied to the job once. We're done with you. Be gone with you. Off with your head.
It's so true. It's just like, what are you doing? Like, you've got all this golden talent there that you're not talking to, but also they're paying fees for talent they've already got sat in their CRM. It's like, come on, guys. How difficult is this? So yeah, for me, sometimes there's a lot more work to be done in the talent pool that they have, or even actually educating them in terms of what do we mean by a talent pool. So that's something that we talk to clients about a lot, actually.
Yeah, we did an analysis of one of our clients' CRMs and ATSs to see how much overlap there was on candidates. The average candidate resume was in the data, and they had several hundred recruiters, granted, but the average candidate resume was in the database 10 or 11 times. So that means they paid for that resume 11 times to be downloaded from, probably varying different job boards and things like that. Now, ATSs and CRMs have deduplication technology, so this is before that. But even so, there's lots of duplication that takes place because of just the way the CRMs and the ATSs are built. They use a different email address, they use a different cell phone number, so even though they have the same first and last name, comes in with a different, resume Jeff at gmail.com, and then resume Jeff at yahoo.com. He's like, I want to keep them separate. So lots of duplication. So once we identified that, we figured out that this company was spending about $400,000 or $500,000 on resumes more than one time. And we saved them $500,000 a year just in resume costs, because we shut off all of the recruiters' means and they had to put it into a single database. They weren't putting it onto their hard drives anymore. So it wasn't a distributed hard drive database. It was more, this is the ATS, this is what you use, this is the CRM, that's what you use. That's the single point of candidate, right? Yeah. So, and a lot of startups, they miss that. A lot of startups are still using spreadsheets or Google Docs or Drives, or even their Outlook or their Gmail accounts, and they put things in folders, or they use their LinkedIn account and they put everything in there, right? So worst practices, it is a practice, it helps you get by, it is Band-Aid stuff. Get to a CRM or an ATS as quickly as possible, and get that implemented. Doesn't matter what it is, because you'll be able to extract the data. If it sucks, you move on to the next one, right? There's 1,000 of them out there, right? But get an ATS and a CRM in there.
You're talking my language 100%. And I think that, a spreadsheet will cost you money. Like, I hear clients say we can't afford an ATS, but like you say, you're just throwing money away anyway on the time that it takes.
For 50 or $100 a month. It's not a major expense, especially for a startup that's got some kind of funding. You have to have one of those in place. It's as critical if you don't have your jobs posted on your career site, or have a career section on your website that has your jobs posted, right? Where that allows them to apply. Those are kind of standard operating procedures. Every company needs to have that right now. Even I have got that, and I only have 3 open jobs.
You go into companies and CVs are flying all over the business because they're coming in randomly to different hiring managers. Aside from all the data protection piece, it's like no one knows those CVs are even there in the business. So just streamlining it all into an ATS, making sure that you've got that regular communication. But for me as well, I spent 15 years as a recruiter, and I think the thing that made me a successful recruiter was my network and actually talking to people. Like, how many recruiters talk to candidates,
I was so funny. I was just going to go like this, but most of the kids watching this aren't going to know what this is. So pick up the phone, right? You got to pick up the phone.
Really, it's like build a network, make relationships. That for me was the thing that made me a successful recruiter, and I don't see enough of that now. We've automated a lot of things, which is brilliant. It's great, it works, but that personal connection, talking to people, keeping in touch, asking for referrals, they're all things that work still really well in recruitment today. And I think even like you can have like the live chat, opening up those live chat, answering questions, it's just like, it's human to human communication. I think it's so important, and I think if we lose that altogether, it's just making the job so much harder, actually.
Yeah, automation is there to make your recruiters' lives and your hiring managers' lives easier, right? To give them more time to talk to candidates, either text, email, or on the phone, and to develop those relationships. Automation wasn't put in place to, start having those things pulled back. That doesn't make sense, right? Get the minutia off your desk. That's the whole point of automation. Having to auto respond to 125 people that were not qualified for a position individually doesn't make sense. But having a good candidate experience does. So highlight them all, do an automation, get it out there, right? You have to at least do the automation. So many companies don't even do the automation.
And also try and make it a bit personal, even if it is an automation. At least
we're not hiring you. Goodbye. Done.
Yeah, it's always like, we have
straight to the point. Rip off that.
So many applications we don't have time to get back to. Well, if it's for a web developer role, which no one can hire for, do you have so many applications that you can't get back to people? Maybe not. I don't know. But I'm not suggesting you pick up the phone to every candidate that applies. But when someone's in process, also that is your talent pool. So make sure that giving them a great experience, no matter whether they get the job this time around or not. And I also see clients, they don't go back to the people that were in that process. A year later, that person might not have been quite ready for your role, but a year later, they could well have that extra experience. So,
we had a candidate recycling program. So when I was at a big RPO, when I first started there, we were spending about $7-8 million a year on job boards. One of the ways we did is the candidate deduplication, efforts and getting them off the hard drives. That was one effort. The other effort was we had literally millions of candidates in this database. So I said, look, why aren't we recycling these candidates into other jobs? If they were a bronze, silver, or gold medalist and they weren't the one that got hired, then you should be reapproaching those candidates for other positions within that organization. That just only makes sense, right? Yeah. If just because hiring manager A doesn't want them or because they found a better candidate, doesn't mean that, A, B, and C, well, B, C, D, and E are probably still very good candidates. They made it through the interview process, right? You were probably going to use them as a backup candidate if candidate A doesn't accept your offer. Exactly. So get them in front of other hiring managers as much as you can.
Yeah. And I think what used to happen in big corporates and early in my career was you would get moved around different departments. So you might have started out in marketing, but say you might express an interest in working in HR, or, you could move around, but I think that happens a lot less rarely now. And I think, are we overlooking skills that could be retrained? I feel like a lot of people have transferable skills that sometimes we overlook. And that to me is a shame. And I think, speaking from an older person, like I've gone through iterations in my career. So I started.
You're referring to me?
No, me.
Oh, you're a babe. You're a babe in the woods.
I started in marketing, I moved into recruitment, and then I moved into sort of HR. And I think that actually, for me, I enabled myself to do those things. But I think companies should be more open and willing to look at giving people that opportunity. And I think most people have got 2 or 3 careers in them, personally. I think, we don't.
I started off as a baby photographer. Then I went into a candidate sourcer. Then I went into sales. And then I went back into
So I think don't overlook that, hire for the job they could do and not necessarily the job they've done before. So yeah, we need to be much more open about these things, I think.
Be flexible, especially large organizations. Small organizations, it's even more critical, right? That one person is going to wear many hats invariably. They're going to do, accounting, payroll, accounts receivable, accounts payable, anything in account, if it has a number attached to it. They might be doing pricing models one day and then doing payroll the next, right? But somebody else at a large company, there's no reason why you can't have them do those kinds of things either.
No, and I think that would be like the most progressive businesses for me. I really love the fact that so many startups and other companies are following like the line of Google, but actually the guy that kind of ripped up the rule book at Google, like Laszlo Bug, he didn't come from an HR background. He came into that role not from that background. So I think that's a learning for me. It's like, I've been chatting to a guy earlier who is now a really senior leadership coach. He's amazing at that, but he used to be a finance director. So, why not? Why not look at the skills that you have and understand what could be retrained?
Just because it's not the typical career path doesn't mean it's not a viable career path.
No, exactly. Yeah.
All right. We're coming up on the hour. Any last thoughts here about employer branding as a whole and how to launch a brand new employer branding campaign and all that?
Yeah, I think it is about like collectively getting people together in the business and trying to get that buy-in. That's a lot of what they pay us to do, it seems, is go in and get the people around the leadership table and get the buy-in in the first place. So I think that's kind of a really key part of doing this, is to get that education piece sorted so that people understand why you're doing it and what you're doing, so that actually they kind of help you along the journey, so that you've got the hiring managers on side. Because otherwise I think it can become a bit of a lonely job, where you're kind of pushing everything out and no one's kind of like looking at the sort of process with you and helping you. So I think as well, when it comes to content, the more that you do that collectively as well, the easier that becomes as well. And it's not down to just one person's job to get all of this sorted. That would be my lasting bit of advice.
Nicola, thank you so much for coming on the 10X Candidate Experience Show. everybody, I know we're recording this right before Christmas. You're probably not going to see it until January, but Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, all that fun stuff. Thanks a lot, everybody.
See you.